The NHL Trade Deadline is less than 2 weeks away, and we're looking at some targets for the New York Rangers. Could Jordan Eberle make some sense if Seattle continues to fall out of the playoff chase? Could the Rangers be interested in adding a hard-nosed, defensive-minded center? And could they be back in the market for a defenseman that they once coveted?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1014 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's have some fun here. Obviously, it's been a really fun month already. The Rangers are 10-1 in the month of February, and the hope being, of course, that they can close out with a win, get a little bit of payback against the Blue Jackets, who, of course, have been a thorn in this team's side pretty much all season. And honestly, it kind of feels like in recent seasons as well. But we're going to do, a fun activity today. Going to stick with a theme that we've gone with a little bit earlier this season and leading into the trade deadline here. Basically just going to look at a couple of different trade targets for the New York Rangers heading in to that March 8th deadline at 3 p.m. And quick announcement, I'm planning on hopefully doing a live episode on that day. Again, Friday, March 8th at 3 p.m. I'll go live a little bit before then, or maybe even early in the day if the Rangers strike a trade, in the morning or whatever it might be. But that's then. This is now. And we're going to start today's episode by talking about a player that's been linked to the Rangers in the past and somebody that could make some sense for them in a trade. And that would be Jordan Eberle, 33-year-old right winger, an occasional center for the Seattle Kraken. I do feel like his name comes up every so often when it comes to the Rangers. I feel like we've even talked about him in the past, maybe one way or another, working his way to the Rangers, whether, he's been a free agent in the past or, a trade deadline deal, whatever the case might be. Eberle is an unrestricted free agent after the season ends. And a quick disclaimer here. The Seattle Kraken, not guaranteed to sell at the trade deadline. I do feel like they've kind of underachieved this year after what was obviously a strong run last season. They're not hopelessly out of it, but they're sort of going in the wrong direction right now. Just 4-4-2 in their last 10 games. They have 59 points, which is 7 behind the Predators. Predators are currently, they hold the second wildcard spot with 66 points. And in the Western Conference as a whole, the Kraken are currently in 12th place, which obviously does not get it done as far as playoffs are concerned. So I got to think they're at least somewhat open for business. And really, there's quite a few players. I tweeted this out the other day on the Kraken that make at least some sense to the Rangers. Obviously, Eberle, we're going to talk about him. We got some guys, maybe we'll talk about them in the future. Alex Wenberg has recently been linked to the Rangers. Tomas Tatar, if the Kraken sell, you got to figure they'll move him. He's a low-cost player who is an impending UFA. Yanni Gourde, I know a lot of Ranger fans like him and would be interested in him. So we'll talk about Gourde in greater detail in a future episode. And maybe even one or two others. Brandon Tanev, he's somebody that might be able to be had at the deadline, whether it's by the Rangers or anybody else. But yeah, for right now, let's focus in on Eberle, longtime Edmonton Oiler, semi-long-term or long-time New York Islander as well. Spent 7 seasons with the Oilers, 4 with the Islanders, these last 3 with the Kraken. 993 games for Eberle in his career, 14-year career, 295 goals, 397 assists. He's a minus 52, which is a lot. That's a lot worse than I was expecting to see for somebody like Jordan Eberle, although he has been a plus in 6 of his last 8 seasons. So he's been better in that department. 393 block shots, 533 hits, 555 takeaways against 562 giveaways, and a one-time All-Star with Edmonton all the way back in 2011, 2012. This year with Seattle, 53 games, 13 goals, 21 assists, 34 points. It's a +9, 1702 of ice time per night, 13 block shots, 17 hits, 39 takeaways against 16 giveaways. And as far as, how he would fit with the Rangers and what kind of a role he would play, we've been talking on and on all season basically about how there is kind of a revolving door and something of a black hole as it pertains to that top line right wing spot. We've seen a lot of players come and go, and a lot of different guys get a crack at it. Kako and Wheeler and Brodzinski was there for a while. Now Jimmy Vesey is there. And, if the Rangers are trailing late in games, it's not any of those guys. They'll typically, put Panarin with Mika and Kreider, or they'll do what we saw in the most recent game where it was Lafreniere with Mika and Kreider. The bottom line is that, Lafreniere, Mika, and Panarin. But the bottom line is, they don't have that go-to top line right wing player on this roster right now. And I don't know that they have him as far as a call-up either. Doesn't seem like they want to push Brennan Othmann. So, and even if they did, I don't know that you'd throw him right into that role. The trade market might be the place to go to get somebody. And Jordan Eberle could very well play that role for the Rangers. Now, he's not somebody that is like a top-line offensive, dynamic right winger that, you pick him up and you're going to plug him right into that spot. But I do think that he's probably a better option than anybody else that the Rangers have on the roster right now. That's assuming that, you leave the Lafreniere, Panarin, and Trocheck line together. If you do that, certainly your options are limited there. And I think Eberle, bring him in, he would probably immediately become the best option there. It's a lot, you go from the Kraken to the Rangers and you're, thrust right into a top line right wing role. But Eberle's been around for a long time. He's a veteran. I think he can handle it, and be interested to see how he would kind of click with Mika and with Kreider. Another nice thing about Eberle is he does bring some leadership to the table as well. He's been commended for that role that he's played with various teams, the Oilers, for a while. He was an alternate captain for them for a couple of seasons there, and he's been an alternate captain for the Kraken ever since they came into existence. This, of course, being their third year. He's had the A on his jersey ever since that happened. And I actually sold him short with the Oilers. He was an alternate captain for 5 years there. So he is a leader and somebody that could come in and play that role with the Rangers as well. They're not going to throw a letter on his jersey just being a rental, but a veteran who's been in the playoffs a decent amount of times and somebody that seems to be well respected around the league. Also worth noting, Eberle does have a modified no-move clause. He can block trades to 16 different teams, and as is usually the case, we don't know which teams are on that list. Are the Rangers there? Would he block a trade to the Rangers or anywhere else? He has spoken very highly about Seattle and has talked about how his family loves it there, and it sounds like he wants to stay there, but, will a contract get done before the trade deadline? An extension with the Kraken? Would he just play out the contract in Seattle and then try to re-sign with them in the offseason? Does Seattle want him back? We don't really know the answers to any of these questions, but definitely food for thought. And it's possible that he could block a trade to the Rangers. Would he be like an extreme Islander loyalist? And, if the Rangers are on his no move clause, would he, for that reason, block a trade to the Rangers? I feel like probably not. I guess you can't really rule it out, but we've seen a lot of players over the years play for both teams, and it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal as much as it would have been, a few decades ago. But 76 career playoff games between the Oilers and the Islanders. He has gotten to the conference finals with the Islanders twice in recent history, has never played in the Stanley Cup finals, though. And as far as him being willing to waive the no-move clause to the Rangers or anybody else, you would think, he's 33, he'll be 34 in May. It's not ancient. He's got a few years left, but you only got so many more shots at it as far as winning the Stanley Cup is concerned. So for that reason, I would think he would, I can't speak for him, but I would think that he would, at least consider waiving it to go to a contender and potentially, chase a Stanley Cup. This stat I really like: 76 career playoff games for Eberle, 19 goals and 28 assists. So he does tend to bring it in the playoffs and actually score it, what appears to be a little bit higher clip in terms of points per game in the playoffs than he does in the regular season. Most recently, last year with the Kraken, 11 points in 14 games, helped the Kraken get to the second round. And they were eliminated in 7 games in the second round. But regardless, he had a nice showing there, and somebody that's been there and done that as far as the playoffs are concerned. One obstacle here, though, in addition to the possible issues with the no-move clause, Jordan Eberle does have a cap hit of $5.5 million. So if the Rangers were going to bring him in, there's going to have to be cap retention on Seattle's part. They'd probably have to pick up, half of that tab there, so to speak. And, that the Rangers might be somewhat limited as far as other things that he could do. Other things that they could do as far as other players that they could bring in at the deadline. Eberle's not one of my top tier favorite trade deadline targets, but again, he's just a solid player, veteran player, somebody that knows what he's doing. I'm sure he would be motivated, given the fact that he's getting up there a little bit and would have a chance to, take another run at the Stanley Cup. He plays right wing, which, as we've noted pretty much all season, that is an area of weakness for the New York Rangers. So if you could get him without giving up a first rounder, which might be hard in this market, but if you could do that, if you could give up, and this is going to be a theme on today's episode, but if you could give up a second rounder and a middling prospect, not one of your top prospects, but a second rounder and, a decent prospect, it might be worth it to solidify this Ranger roster, solidify that top line, solidify the right wing spot, and hopefully go get yourself a Stanley Cup. It's you only have so many shots at this. And, the Ranger core group of players are not going to be here forever. They're having a phenomenal season. So to go out and get somebody, even if you have to overpay a little bit, it could be worth it to go try to chase Stanley Cup glory. So food for thought there. And, I do like Eberle, not one of my absolute favorites, but the more I talk about him, the more I like him. I think he'd be a nice addition to this Ranger team. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. There's a hard-nosed center that a lot of you guys really seem to like. I've noticed his name popping up in the YouTube comment section, so going to go ahead and talk about that player in just a second. First, though, we definitely would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by our good friends at Gametime. You should not have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and much, much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. I want to shift our attention to a different position. We've actually got, today we got a right winger, we got a center, we got a defenseman. So nice balance here. We're going to turn our attention to somebody that I know a lot of you like. Again, I've seen his name pop up pretty often in the YouTube comment section and social media as a whole, and that would be 33-year-old center for the Washington Capitals, Nick Dowd, 6'1", 193 pounds. So he's got some size. Quick disclaimer, Dowd is hurt right now. Apparently, though, earlier today, and it is Monday morning, or rather Monday afternoon at this point that I'm recording this, but Dowd was back at practice in a non-contact jersey. He's expected to miss the next game, but it doesn't sound like the injury is too serious, and he should be back out there sooner rather than later. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem if you're interested in Nick Dowd. And I know there's some fans out there, too, that, they're kind of a little bit tired of rentals. I understand why the Rangers acquire rentals because a lot of times they can't afford them past, the current season. But with Dowd, he's not a pure rental. He is under contract for next year as well. And I think he's somebody that if you're a little bit still unsure about the Rangers bottom six, you want somebody with a little bit more experience than a Matt Rempe or an Adam Edstrom. You want somebody who could be an option at third line center, maybe in place of Johnny Brodzinski. If you'd rather have Brodzinski on the fourth line rather than the third line, or not even. You could leave Brodzinski at the third line. Dowd could be the fourth line center. But the bottom line, Dowd could be your guy if you feel any of these sorts of ways about any of these things that I just mentioned there. And there's some good reasons to like Dowd. Very low cap hit of just $1.3 million. He is a very physical player. He puts on, he's a blue collar player. Goes out there and goes to work every night. There is experience. He's been around for a while. And again, depending on whether you don't mind strict rentals or not, he wouldn't be one. He is under contract for next season as well and would likely stick in the fold for the Rangers if they were to bring him in at the deadline this season. And if they do indeed bring him in, again, $1.3 million, even with no salary retained, if you trade for Nick Dowd, and even if there's no salary going the other way, you just bring in Dowd, you still have enough cap space if you're the Rangers to do something else. You're not handcuffed, and you're in a situation where you could probably still go out and get that top line right winger. If you bring in Nick Dowd to be a third or fourth line center, you still have enough left over to go get yourself, a top six right wing type player. So that's probably a good thing as well. As far as Dowd's career stats, he has played with the Kings, half a season with the Canucks, and last handful of seasons with the Caps. 481 games, 66 goals, 77 assists, 143 points. He's a plus 25, 339 block shots, 888 hits, 210 takeaways against 156 giveaways. So not a ton of offense, not completely anemic either. Though, he can chip in offensively from time to time. He has never had more than 25 points in a season. That was 2 years ago with the Caps when that happened. This year with the Caps, 8 goals, 8 assists in 45 games to go along with a +8. And the Caps have struggled this year. So if you're on the right side of a +8, you got to be doing something right, the right side of a ±. So, in a nutshell, some offense, again, to go along with a guy who is a very good defensive forward, a very gritty player. He'll go to the tough areas of the rink. He'll stick his nose in there. Doesn't really shy away from the physicality, as evidenced by the fact that he has 888 career hits. Solid face-off guy as well. Now, this year, he's under 50. He's at 48.9% as far as, how many draws he's won this year. But he has been over 50%, won more than half of his faceoffs in 5 of his last 7 seasons. And for his career, he's at 51.4% on the faceoff dot. So obviously not elite, but, solid overall. If you're over half, that's obviously a good thing. And I should also point out, the Caps aren't dead yet. They're not completely buried like some of these teams are that we know are going to be sellers. They are 8 points out of the second wild card, but due to the Metro not being as good as I think a lot of us thought it would be this season, they're actually closer to third place in the Metro than they are the second wild card spot. So right now, the Flyers have 67 points. They're in third place in the Metro. The Devils have 62 points, and then the Caps have 61 points. So they are somewhat within striking distance, but it's an aging team. They probably have to rebuild sooner rather than later. I think they want to do right by Ovechkin and maybe not go full-fledged rebuild. But I don't know, man. That's a team that's really getting up there, and I got to think they're at least open for business, given where they are in the standings at this current time. Another nice thing about Nick Dowd, very good penalty killer. Rangers are a good penalty-killing team. They have been all season. They've been in or near the top 5 in the NHL as far as best penalty kill units. But you know what? Never hurts to add another penalty killer, and Nick Dowd is a very, very good one. So he can help in that area as well. And you think about playoff hockey and just how important the penalty kill becomes. You have to, hopefully stay out of the box as much as you can, but it's playoff hockey. Everybody's flying around there a million miles an hour. There's going to be some penalties from time to time, and you got to be able to kill them off. And Nick Dowd can help in that area as well. As far as the return, again, I think maybe he shouldn't command a first rounder. It's possible that he does because, again, I just feel like this is such a seller's market this year, and there just aren't those like top of the line star players. And on top of that, 2 of the better players that were going to be available at the deadline, Lindholm and Monahan, they've already been traded. So now becomes even more of a seller's market now that those 2 players are off the board. But, for Dowd, give up maybe like a second rounder and a prospect who is not named Perreault or Othman or Sakura. We might be talking at that point. Would that get it done? It's possible. It's also possible that with the seller's market, somebody's willing to throw in a first rounder, throw in, a pretty darn good prospect. We'll see. One other X factor that I wanted to throw out there as well. Would the Caps do business with the Rangers? Would they help the Rangers? There's no love lost there. I looked up the trade history between these 2 teams. They've actually done 5 trades in the last 10 years, but when they do strike trades, it's for like players you've barely heard of or not heard of at all, or they're swapping draft picks, something along those lines. They've never really given up, a significant player to each other in a situation where one team's buying and the other team is selling. So I don't know. I mean, would they charge the Rangers a little bit more for Nick Dowd? It's possible. That is a hurdle that they might have to get around. We'll see. One other thing that's working against Dowd, and again, this all hinges on how important you think this is, but he has only played in 26 career Stanley Cup playoff games, 4 goals, 1 assist in that time. He did score an overtime playoff goal in Game 1 against the Bruins in the first round in 2021. He's also a -7 in the playoffs. He was also not on the Caps during their run to the Stanley Cup. He had not yet joined the team, so he missed out on that. And he's actually never played more than 8 playoff games in a single run. His teams haven't really gotten all that far. And obviously that's not all on Nick Dowd, but I'm just pointing that out. And one more fun fact about Nick Dowd. He was one of the players on the ice when the Capitals and Rangers basically just brawled the entire night. That was one game after the incident with Tom Wilson. And Nick Dowd was out there to start the game, and he got into one of the 3 fights that broke out as soon as the puck dropped. He fought Kevin Rooney for the Rangers on that night. But I like Dowd. The more I talk about him, the more I like him. His upside is very limited in terms of offense. He's only got to do so much. Basically, he's a third of a point per game player. That's about what he's been for his career. That's about what he is this year. But he does add some physicality. He does add some toughness, some snarl, some experience. And here's my thing with Dowd. If they bring him in and he's like the second or third biggest pickup that they get at the trade deadline, that's awesome. If they bring in Nick Dowd and he's like the biggest player, the most important player that they add at the deadline, I don't think that's good enough. I think the Rangers have to aim a little bit higher in terms of who the best player that they're going to bring in at the trade deadline will be. I think it should be somebody, frankly, with more offense and just more upside than Nick Dowd. But if you bring in Nick Dowd and he's like the second or third most important piece that you get at the deadline, that might be a really good deadline. I think Dowd could really help this team. And, again, adds that physicality. Just one of those players that knows exactly who he is as a player. There's no secrets. Does a lot of the little things really well and can help the Rangers in a variety of ways. So I like Dowd a lot. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to continue our conversation about trade deadline targets in just a second here. We're going to turn our attention to a defenseman that the Rangers at one time coveted. They never ended up striking a deal to bring him in, but it's possible he could be back on the market heading into the deadline this season, coming up, this trade deadline season. And we're going to talk about that very player in just a second. First, though, we definitely would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling. Also want to let everyone know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, so one more player to talk about before we call it a day here. And, we're going to continue talking. There's going to be a lot of trade deadline talk in the next couple of days. If the Rangers don't play the night before, then the next episode is probably going to have a lot to do with the trade deadline, because it's time, man. We're less than 2 weeks away here. Always a very exciting part of the NHL calendar. But for right now, we're going to talk about our first defenseman. We've done a lot of these episodes and I've mostly been focusing on, right wing and center, but I know there's some people out there that would like to see the Rangers trade for a defenseman, and there's one that has been linked to the Rangers in the past. It seems like they like him, at least to some extent, and that would be 25-year-old defenseman for the Ottawa Senators, Jakob Chychrun, big guy at 6'2", 205 pounds. And the Senators don't have to trade him because he is under contract for this year and next year, but they are buried right now. Just another disastrous season for the Ottawa Senators. I don't really know how else you can say it. They'll certainly be sellers and certainly listen to some offers. They actually acquired Chychrun at the deadline last year, thinking they could compete as soon as this year. They have not competed. Chychrun has this year left on his deal as well as next year at $4.6 million a season. So again, going to have to come with some salary retention if the Rangers were to pick him up from Ottawa. But, again, they don't have to trade him. But if they want to keep retooling and if they saw this season as a wake-up call and, man, we still have a lot of work to do and we still have a lot of rebuilding to do, it's possible that they kind of look at next season as a wash and don't think they can compete there either. And at that point, moving Jakob Chychrun becomes a viable option for the Ottawa Senators. And for his career, 373 games with the Coyotes and the Senators. He got his start when he was only 18. That's why there's so many games and he's still only 25 years old. But in that time, 60 goals, 110 assists, so 170 points in those 373 games for a defenseman. He's also a minus 38. We'll chalk that up mostly to playing on some bad teams. I mean, he's never played on anything even resembling a good team. 681 block shots, 545 hits, 150 takeaways against 342 giveaways. Something else that's unique is that he can play the left side as well as the right side. And there is some history between the Rangers and Senators as far as striking deals is concerned. Just this past year at the deadline, Tyler Mott for Julien Gauthier. A bunch of years ago, Mika Zibanejad for Derek Brassard. And there were draft picks involved in some of these trades too, but we're just going to go through it quickly here. In 2018, the Rangers actually traded up in the first round to draft Keandre Miller at number 22 overall. The Rangers sent their own first-round pick and a second-round pick to Ottawa. And, I mean, who could ever forget the 2019 trade that sent Vladislav Namestnikov to the Senators in exchange for Nick Hebert, and a fourth-round pick. Surely none of us will ever forget where we were when that trade happened. But, again, there is history here. It does seem like they've been able to strike deals in recent seasons. I know some people would like to see the Rangers add Vladimir Tarasenko back to their roster this season. That's an option as well. We've talked about Tarasenko in the past. But again, there was history when Chychrun was still on the Coyotes. The Rangers were interested in him. I don't know how far it ever got, how serious they ever were, but I've never been able to shake this feeling. Chychrun's a good player. Don't get me wrong. I've never been able to shake this feeling that he is at least somewhat overrated. Now, this isn't the end-all be-all, what I'm about to say here, but right now, he is listed as a third-pair defenseman on the Senators. The Senators, they are not having a good season, and he's not even playing in their top four. So, as far as him coming over here, what kind of role he's going to have, I don't see them, acquiring Chychrun and throwing him out there on the top pairing with Adam Fox and dropping Lindgren down. Fox seems to be at his best when Ryan Lindgren is out there with him. Chychrun would probably, if he's going to come over, you'd probably see him replace maybe Erik Gustafsson in the lineup, and you'd have Chychrun and Schneider as your third-line pairing. Would the Rangers, if they brought in Chychrun, would they also flip one of their young defensemen somewhere else to bring in a different player? Could Keandre Miller be traded? We heard rumors about that a while ago. Braden Schneider, I wouldn't trade any of these players. I really wouldn't, and I especially wouldn't do it just to make room for Jakob Chychrun, who, again, good player, but we don't know how he's going to do with the Rangers. They have good defensemen right now. I just don't think it's necessary to give up what the Rangers would have to give up to get him. If you look at a couple years ago, or just last year at the deadline, in fact, the Senators gave up a lot to get this guy. So they sent to the Coyotes a first-round pick and 2 second-round picks to get Jakob Chychrun. To me, that is way overboard. I can't see the Rangers even considering giving up that much. Would that be what the Senators were looking to get for him? It's exactly what they just paid to get him in the first place. So maybe they would want a price that high. Would somebody be willing to do it? I don't think the Rangers are going to give up that much. I really don't. I don't know. I am intrigued. He is a good player. He's a good, well-rounded defenseman. There's times where he's kind of seen as an offensive defenseman, but he brings it defensively as well. He does play a physical style. This is somebody, though, that, as far as the Norris is concerned, I see on his hockey reference page, he finished as high as 10th in the Norris back in 2020, 2021. There's not another mention of him even being in the mix for the Norris other than that. So, again, good player, but I don't think he's the second coming of Brian Leetch, the way that certain people around the NHL would have you believe. And another thing that's kind of working against Chychrun, and again, this depends on how much stock you put into this. Basically, no playoff experience. The only time he's been to the playoffs was the bubble year when 24 teams got in, and he was with the Coyotes, played 9 games in the playoffs that year, had 1 goal and no assists in those 9 games. He was also a -4. And yeah, I don't know. To me, it's just somebody that it just screams overpayment to me. I mean, I just don't think. First of all, you got to get around the whole situation where would the Senators even be willing to do this, or do they want to hang on to him and try to contend again next season? So there's that. They don't have to trade him. There's also the fact that he went for a king's ransom the last time he was traded. And I just don't think the Rangers would go that high. Now, could the Rangers add a defenseman at the deadline? Yeah, I think that's possible. But I think if they do that, they'd be looking to add somebody that would step in here and be like the 6th defenseman, the 7th defenseman, maybe somebody who the majority of time would be a healthy scratch, or maybe he would eventually take one of the jobs away from either Schneider or Gustafsson. That's at least possible. But I don't see them going big game hunting as far as defensemen are concerned. Think about like 2 years ago when they brought in Justin Braun. Certainly not a superstar at that point in his career. I believe he was about 35 years old when that happened, but he at least gave them another option. He gave them some depth. And of course, he eventually took the starting job away from Patrick Nemeth. Nemeth was the odd man out in the healthy scratch for the majority of the games in the playoffs that year. And, Braun took that job from him, basically. But that's the kind of player I see the Rangers adding. Not somebody that's like a prime of his career, like dynamic defenseman, like Jacob Chychrun. I do think, again, that he's a little bit overrated, but he is a very good player. Take nothing away. So, yeah, I think you're looking, if the Rangers do add a defenseman, it's going to be like a depth kind of a guy. And, again, somebody that at best would be like the 6th defenseman, maybe even the 7th defenseman. Just give yourself another option heading toward the playoffs. But figure we can call it there. Once again, if you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. And if you guys want me to talk about another, trade target that the Rangers could look at in the future, somebody that I haven't covered yet on Locked On Rangers, let me know. Leave it in the comment section on YouTube. Email it to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. The email, of course, that I just gave to you. Or you can even send in an audio file, and I'll play that on a future episode. Try to keep it to like 60 to 90 seconds at the most. But we had a couple people send in audio files recently, and that was a lot of fun. And I think it's something that we could do going forward as well. So definitely let me know. I mean, the floor is yours. If there's a player you want the Rangers to go after and you have certain points that you'd like to make about that player, just let me know. I'll discuss it on a future episode. I'll read your comments on an episode, and we'll talk about that player and all the pros and cons and all that good stuff, and if the Rangers could ultimately end up adding said player. But once again, that will do it. Thank you guys as always, and I will see you next time.